My wife and I agreed to sell our family house for $750, $0, but she secretly signed over half the proceeds, and now she's claiming I owe her $300, $0 in additional support after I caught her cheating with our neighbor and filed for divorce. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating on him, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The whole thing started small, little signs that I brushed off at first. My wife had been acting weird for a few weeks. She'd be secretive about her phone, hiding texts behind her hand, deleting messages when I came close. At first, I figured she was just stressed with work or maybe got caught up in some girl drama. We'd been together for over 10 years, married for 7, and I thought I knew her pretty well. But looking back, there were definitely cracks forming. It was around the time we decided to sell our family house, something we'd talked about for years. The house was old, full of memories, and honestly I was ready for a fresh start. We agreed on a selling price of $750, $0. That was supposed to be our big break, a chance to finally pay off debts, invest, and start new. But right after we signed the paperwork, started acting even stranger. She was more distant, less interested in planning the move, and her phone seemed glued to her side. I caught her sneaking around one night in the kitchen, whispering on the phone with someone I didn't recognize. When I asked who it was, she said it was her sister, Lisa. But Lisa was at her parents' house that night, and I knew she wasn't lying. Something wasn't right. Then came the little things, forgotten plans, late nights working late, and her avoiding my gaze. I started paying more attention. One night I decided to check her phone while she was out. I didn't want to do it, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I found a string of messages between her and our neighbor, Mark, that made my stomach turn. They were talking about meeting up, about keeping it secret, and there was this one message that said, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." My heart stopped for a second. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was reading, and Mark, our neighbor, having sex. That was the moment I knew something was seriously wrong. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to see more to be sure. So I kept digging, going through her emails, her social media. It was like peeling back layers of a lie. I found pictures of her and Mark together, kissing in his garage, holding hands at a restaurant. They'd been sneaking around for months, probably longer. I felt numb, like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? After everything we built, after all those years. I was furious, hurt, betrayed, every emotion crashing down at once. The worst part, reaction when I finally confronted her. She spun this whole story about how it was just sex, that Mark was just a fling she needed, and that I was overreacting. She called me paranoid, said I was insecure, and started crying, trying to make me feel guilty for catching her. She claimed she was just lonely, that I'd been too busy with work, that she deserved some fun. The audacity of her. She even had the nerve to say I owed her for emotional support during the marriage, especially when I was away on business trips. That's when I realized she'd been planning this all along, turning the tables to make herself the victim. The betrayal hit me hard, not just because she cheated, but because she lied so effortlessly. She's always been pretty bitchy, sharp-tongued, dismissive, always putting herself first. But this was a new level of manipulation. I felt like I didn't even recognize her anymore. I thought I knew her, but it was Alla. I was angry at her for the affair, but also at myself for not seeing the signs sooner. I kept replaying the moments when she was distant, the little lies she told, the way she brushed me off. It was like I'd been blind all along, and now I was paying the price. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let her get away with this betrayal, but I also didn't want to jump into revenge blindly. I needed a plan. I needed to understand what I was dealing with financially, emotionally, legally. That's when I started digging into the house sale, the money, the property. Papers, turns out, had secretly signed over half the proceeds from selling our house to herself, without my knowledge. She'd been planning her escape for months, possibly even before I caught her. That's when I realized this wasn't just about cheating. It was about her trying to take everything I worked for. So here I am at this crossroads. I'm hurt, I'm angry, and I'm trying to piece together all the lies. The betrayal has changed everything, and I'm starting to see that this isn't just a fling or a mistake. It's a calculated move to hurt me and take what she can. I don't know what's coming next, but I do know one thing. I'm not going to let her walk away with my life's work, and I'm not going to let her keep lying to my face. The real fight is just beginning. After I found out about this affair with Mark, everything changed in an instant. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling around the betrayal, the lies, the fact that she'd been sneaking around behind my back for who knows how long. Of course, she everything at first, calling me paranoid, saying I was imagining things. That was classic, always quick to dismiss, but I had enough evidence now. The messages, the photos, her secret signing over half the house proceeds. It was all there, and I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I sat her down one night after she came home from her work event, which I now suspected was just another excuse. She looked annoyed, like she didn't want to deal with me. I kept my voice calm but firm. I told her I knew about her and Mark, about the messages, the photos, everything. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer. She started spinning a new story, telling me I was overreacting, that I was just jealous, that Mark was just a friend she was helping out. She even threw in the line that I owed her emotional support and that she was just trying to find happiness. That was her go-to: deny, lie, manipulate. I couldn't take it. I told her I wanted the truth, no more bullshit. That's when she started crying, saying she never meant for it to get this far, that Mark was just a distraction, that she loved me, that she'd never cheat. If she didn't have to. It was all bullshit. I knew better. She'd been lying for months, maybe longer. I was so mad I could barely see straight. I told her if she thought she could just lie her way out of this, she had another thing coming. I told her I was done playing her game. That night I started digging into the legal side of things. The house sale, the signing over of the proceeds, everything was in her name now, or so she claimed. I needed to find out what rights I had, what she could legally do. Turns out she had secretly signed a document giving herself half of the sale's proceeds without my consent. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to do that behind my back. That's when I realized she'd been planning her escape long before I caught her. She wasn't just cheating, she was trying to take everything I'd built: our house, our savings, my future. I felt sick. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. All I kept thinking about was the betrayal, the lies, the fact that she'd lied so effortlessly, so convincingly. I was furious, at her, at Mark, at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. I started wondering how long she'd been planning this. From the way she'd been acting, it was obvious she'd been looking for an exit for a while. She'd been so bitchy, dismissive, always putting herself first. Now I saw her for what she really was: a manipulative, selfish woman who was willing to screw me over for her own gain. I decided I had to get legal advice. I couldn't just let her walk away with half the house and a fortune she hadn't earned. I needed to protect what was mine. I also knew I had to confront her again, but this time with a plan. I had to be smart, calculated. I started documenting everything: texts, emails, bank statements, the signed papers, and I reached out to a lawyer the next day. I wanted to know what my rights were, what I could do to prevent her from taking more than she was entitled to. I also needed to figure out how to get her to admit the full extent of her betrayal. In the meantime, I kept my distance from. I didn't trust her anymore. Every word she said now sounded like a lie. She kept insisting she was innocent, that Mark was just a friend, that I was overreacting because I was insecure, but I knew better. I could see her desperation, her need to control the narrative. She even tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was ruining her life and that I owed her support for all the years she'd stood by me. That was the last straw. I didn't owe her anything, not after she'd betrayed me like this. The emotional toll was brutal. One minute I was furious, planning my next move, and the next I was deep in sadness, questioning everything I thought I knew about her and our life together. It's strange how quickly trust can evaporate when you realize someone you loved has been lying to you day after day. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, left to pick up the pieces of a life I thought was solid. But even in that darkness, I knew I had to fight. Not just for the house, not just for the money. I needed to reclaim my dignity, my sense of self. I couldn't let her take everything without a fight. Now I'm just waiting for the legal advice to come through, trying to stay grounded. The worst part, knowing that is probably already planning her next move, trying to spin her version of events and maybe even trying to hide more of her tracks. I don't trust her anymore, not even a little. But I'm determined. I won't let her manipulate me, and I definitely won't let her walk away with my future. This is far from over. After I got the legal advice and started digging into the documents, everything became even more clear. Had been planning this whole thing for months. The signed over proceeds from the house sale, her secret accounts, the way she'd been pushing me to settle quickly, even though I was hesitant. She was trying to cut me out of everything, and I realized I'd been blind to her manipulations. The lawyer confirmed that she had no legal right to claim an additional $300, $0 in support unless she could prove she was entitled to it, which she was. But that didn't stop her from trying. I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time with my lawyer present. I wanted her to see I wasn't just some pushover anymore. I sat her down in the living room and she looked annoyed, like I was bothering her. I told her I had spoken to my lawyer, that I had proof of her signing over half the house proceeds, and that I knew about her affair with Mark. Her bitchy attitude instantly turned defensive. She spun her usual lies, saying she was just trying to find herself, that Mark was just a friend with benefits, and that I was overreacting. She kept crying, throwing in the classic line about how I owed her support, how she sacrificed so much for this marriage, and how she deserved to get her fair share. I didn't let her get away with it. I told her I knew she was lying, that I had proof of everything, and that her crying wouldn't change the facts. I also told her I was prepared to go to court if necessary to prevent her from taking more than she was entitled to. She looked furious, then suddenly resigned, like she knew she was losing control. That's when she started trying to manipulate me, saying I was being unfair, that I was just angry because I got caught, that I owed her because of all the years of emotional support she had given me. That made me sick. I told her she was a liar, that I wasn't going to be played anymore, and that if she wanted to fight over the money, I was ready. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal meetings, phone calls, and planning. I started gathering all the evidence, texts, emails, bank statements, and made sure I had everything I needed to prove her deceit. Meanwhile, kept up her act, trying to spin her version of events to anyone who would listen. She told friends she was the victim, that I was trying to control her, that the marriage was over because I was abusive. The truth was, she was the one cheating, lying, and trying to steal. I felt a mix of anger and sadness every time I thought about how she'd betrayed me, not just emotionally but financially as well. Then came the final confrontation in front of the lawyer. Was trying to claim she deserved more support because she'd been through so much, and that I owed her compensation for her sacrifice. I told her she could try to spin it all she wanted, but the law was on my side. I explained that her signing over the proceeds was invalid without my consent, that she had no right to claim additional support beyond what was legally owed, and that I would fight her in court if she insisted on pushing this further. Her bitchy attitude faded into a look of desperation. She knew she was losing control, but she kept trying to argue, to lie, to manipulate her way out of it. Meanwhile, I was starting to feel a strange sense of clarity. All the anger, all the pain was slowly turning into determination. I realized that this wasn't just about money or the house. It was about standing up for myself, about not letting her control my life anymore. I was done being the victim of her lies. I was ready to fight back, legally and emotionally. I decided that once this was over, I'd move on. I wouldn't let her ruin me or take everything I'd worked for. It was time to reclaim what was mine, and I was willing to do whatever it took, even with all her bitchiness and lies. I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who was willing to destroy her marriage and her integrity for a quick payoff. I felt a strange mix of relief and anger. Relief that I'd finally uncovered the truth, and anger that she had tried to cheat me out of my future. This whole experience has been a brutal lesson in trust and betrayal, but I've learned one thing for sure. I won't let anyone, not even my wife, take away what I've built. I'm ready to fight for it, and I'll do whatever it takes to come out on top. The legal battle was now in full swing, and I could feel the pressure mounting. Was still trying to spin her lies, claiming she deserved more support because she'd sacrificed everything for our marriage, and that I was just a cold, uncaring husband who didn't appreciate her. She threw tantrums, called me names, and even tried to guilt me into dropping the case. But I wasn't having any of it. I knew her game. She was desperate to hold on to some semblance of control, to justify her betrayal and theft. One day, she showed up at my office unexpectedly, her face twisted with bitchy anger. She demanded I drop the legal proceedings, that she'd had enough of this nonsense. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her she was wasting her time. I had all the evidence I needed, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. She snapped back, accusing me of being heartless, saying I was just trying to punish her for having feelings. I told her I was trying to protect what was mine, and that her emotional manipulation wasn't going to work anymore. Meanwhile, I started to realize how much her attitude had changed. The woman I once loved was gone, replaced by someone bitter, manipulative, and reckless. She was trying to turn everyone against me, claiming I was a bad husband, a bad person. But I knew the truth. I knew she cheated, lied, and tried to steal from me. I had the evidence, I had the law on my side, and I was determined to see it through. Every day I felt a mix of frustration and resolve. I was tired of her bitchy attitude, tired of her lies, tired of feeling like I was walking on eggshells. One night she called me, trying to negotiate a settlement. She was trying to appear contrite, but I didn't buy it. She insisted she only wanted fair treatment, that she deserved a big chunk of the sale because she'd been supportive all these years. I told her she was full of shit. I reminded her that she had signed over the proceeds, that she had no legal claim to additional support beyond what the courts would decide. I told her if she kept pushing, I'd go all the way and she'd end up with nothing. Her bitchy tone turned sour and she hung up on me in a fit of rage. That was the turning point. I knew I had to stay strong. I started preparing for the worst: court dates, possible accusations, even her trying to drag friends and family into this mess. I kept meticulous records of everything: texts, emails, financial statements. Every lie she told, every manipulative tactic she used, I documented it. I wanted to make sure that if it went to court, I'd have everything I needed to prove her deceit and protect my assets. I also started thinking about my future, how I'd rebuild after this mess, how I'd move on from the betrayal. In the midst of all this chaos, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of clarity. I realized how much I'd lost, but also how much I stood to gain by fighting. His bitchy attitude and lies had exposed her true character, and I refused to be the victim anymore. I was tired of the emotional, tired of her manipulations, and tired of feeling helpless. Now, I felt more determined than ever. I wasn't just fighting over money or the house. I was fighting for my dignity, my future, my peace of mind. Looking back, I see now how much this whole ordeal has changed me. I used to believe in fairness, in honesty, in the idea that marriage was about mutual respect, but showed me that sometimes people are just out for themselves, willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate to get what they want. I won't let her win. I'll keep fighting, and I'll come out stronger on the other side. I've learned that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it means facing the worst betrayal of your life, because in the end, the truth always comes out. The court dates kept piling up, and with each one I could feel the weight of everything pressing down harder. Was still trying to play the victim, claiming she deserved a bigger slice of the pie because she'd been through so much, and that I was just a cold, unfeeling asshole who didn't care about her. She even went as far as to say I was trying to punish her for having feelings, that I was the real villain here. But I had the evidence now, and I wasn't going to let her spin her web of lies anymore. One day, she showed up unexpectedly at my house, this time with her lawyer. Her face was bitchy but also desperate. She demanded I settle, that she didn't want to drag this out anymore. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I was done negotiating. I knew what she was trying to do. She was trying to manipulate her way into a bigger payout, trying to make me feel guilty for everything. I told her she could try all she wanted, but I had the law and the evidence on my side. I explained that her signing over the house proceeds was invalid without my approval, and that she had no legitimate claim to additional money unless a court ordered it. She snapped back with some bullshit about how I was heartless, how I was ruining her life. I just shook my head. I told her I didn't care about her tears or her sob stories. I was done being played. I told her if she kept pushing, I would fight her all the way and she'd end up with nothing. Her bitchy attitude turned sour and she stormed out, but not before throwing some parting shots about how I'd regret this, how I was going to lose everything. That day, I doubled down on my preparations. I worked with my lawyer to craft a solid case, making sure every document, every message, every financial record was in order. I wanted to make it clear that her claims for additional support were baseless. I also started reaching out to friends and family I trusted, warning them about her manipulative tactics. I didn't want her to spin her lies unchecked. Every step I took was about protecting what was mine and making sure she couldn't steal my future. Meanwhile, attitude only got worse. She accused me of being uncaring, of trying to ruin her, and kept insisting she was the real victim. She called me names, tried to guilt-trip me, but I just blocked out her bitchy voice. I knew she was desperate, that her manipulations were a sign she was losing control. I felt a strange mixture of relief and anger. Relief that I finally had the upper hand, and anger that I'd been so blind to her true nature for so long. The woman I once loved had turned into someone I barely recognized, and now I was fighting to keep what was rightfully mine. I spent nights lying awake, thinking about everything, about how she betrayed me, about the lies, the money, the house. I kept replaying her words, her fake tears, her bitchy attitude. But I also started thinking about what I'd do once this was over, how I'd rebuild, how I'd move on from the pain. I realized that the betrayal had opened my eyes to who she really was and that I deserved better. I deserved honesty, loyalty, respect. And I was finally starting to see that I could get all of that back without her. Looking at her now, I see her desperation, her manipulative ways, her bitchy attitude, everything that made her impossible to trust. I also see a woman who's trying to hold onto her own selfish gains, no matter the cost. I know I can't undo what's been done, but I can control what happens next. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail to protect yourself from those who would hurt you the most. And I'm ready to keep fighting, no matter how much she tries to tear me down. Because at the end of the day, I know the truth, and I know I'll come out of this stronger. The court hearing was the culmination of everything. Weeks of legal battles, piles of evidence, and mounting tension. Sat there, her bitchy attitude masked by a false veneer of innocence, insisting she was the victim, that I'd hurt her, that she deserved more because she'd sacrificed so much. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew her game. She was trying to manipulate the system, to spin her lies one last time. The judge listened carefully, flipping through the documents, the messages, the proof of her signing over the house proceeds without my consent. It was all there. When it was my turn, I laid out everything. The affair, her lies, her secret signing over half the house, her manipulative threats. I explained how she'd tried to steal my future, how she'd betrayed everything we built. I showed the court the evidence, the emails, the financial records. I told them about her bitchy attitude, her constant lies, her attempts to guilt-trip me into giving her more support. I made it clear that she had no right to claim additional money, that her claims were unfounded and based on manipulation. As I finished, I saw her face tighten with frustration. Her bitchy smirk was gone, replaced by a flicker of desperation. The judge took a long pause, then delivered the ruling. She ordered to return the signed proceeds, her any additional support, and clarified that her claims were baseless. It was a huge relief. I felt the weight lift off my shoulders for the first time in months. After the court session, I sat outside, taking in the fresh air. I felt exhausted but victorious. I knew wouldn't take this lying down. She'd probably try to appeal or find some way to manipulate the system again. But I was ready. I'd learned so much through this ordeal, about betrayal, about trust, and about standing up for myself. I realized that I'd been a fool for so long, trusting someone who had no intention of being honest. But now, I was finally free from her bitchy manipulations. Looking back, I see how much I've grown. I learned that sometimes the worst betrayals come from those closest to you. that people can be manipulative and selfish, willing to lie and cheat their way to what they want. I also learned that fighting back, legally, emotionally, and mentally, is the only way to reclaim what's yours. I won't pretend it's easy. Trust was shattered, and the pain will linger for a while. But I know I'll move on, stronger and more cautious than before. In the end, I've come to understand that betrayal reveals true character. Her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations, they all exposed her for who she really is, and I refuse to let her define me. I've learned to stand tall, to fight for what's right, and to never let anyone, especially someone you love, take away your dignity. I've lost a lot, but I've gained clarity, and that's worth more than any house or support check. I'm finally ready to start over, and I'm not looking back.